Hi, I'm Alex Chen. Last Tuesday, I watched my entire team walk past my desk, laughing about their lunch reservations at that new sushi place downtown. They didn't invite me. Again. What they didn't know was that the productivity app they'd been struggling to build for 6 months already existed. I'd coded it 18 months ago, refined it in my spare time, and yesterday it caught the attention of our CEO during a board meeting he thought I knew nothing about. They saw me as the quiet girl who fixed their bugs and took notes in meetings. They had no idea I was about to become the reason half of them would be updating their LinkedIn profiles. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in TechFlow's open office cast everything in that particular shade of corporate beige that makes Tuesday feel like an eternity. I adjusted my glasses and stared at the dual monitors displaying code that would have impressed my former Stanford classmates, if any of them knew I worked here. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days debugging other people's amateur attempts at algorithms, while my own creation sat hidden in a private repository, elegant and revolutionary. Brandon Mitchell's voice carried across the office like he wanted the entire floor to hear his lunch plans. He stood near the coffee station, his perfectly pressed button-down and designer watch catching the afternoon light as he gestured animatedly to our team clustered around him. Sophia Reynolds laughed at something he said, her manicured fingers tapping against her Starbucks cup in that rhythm she used when she was performing enthusiasm. Riley Johnson nodded along, desperate to belong to their inner circle, while the rest of our mobile development team hung on Brandon's every word like he was announcing the next iPhone release. I kept typing, each keystroke deliberate and measured, while their conversation drifted over to my corner desk. The corner desk. They'd positioned me here during my first week, claiming it was perfect for focus and concentration. What they really meant was perfect for forgetting I existed. From here, I could see everything but participate in nothing, like watching a movie where everyone else got speaking roles. So, Nobu at 1:30, Brandon was saying, his voice carrying that particular Austin Tech bro confidence that came with a Series A funding round and a company credit card. I made sure to get us the chef's table. The team deserves it after pushing through that sprint. He glanced around the group, mentally counting heads. His eyes passed right over me, the way they always did, like I was part of the office furniture. Sophia tucked a strand of her perfectly highlighted hair behind her ear and smiled. I love how we always celebrate our wins together. That's what makes us such a strong team. The emphasis on us wasn't subtle, but then again, Sophia had never been one for subtlety. She'd made it clear from my first day that there was a hierarchy here, and I occupied the bottom rung. Riley practically bounced on her toes. Should I call and see if they can squeeze in another chair? I mean, just in case. She glanced toward my corner, but Brandon was already shaking his head. Nah, the reservation is perfect as is. Besides, he lowered his voice just enough that I had to strain to hear. Some people prefer to eat at their desks anyway. Alex seems pretty comfortable with her little routine. The snickers that followed felt like paper cuts, small but stinging. I saved my work and reached for my water bottle, taking a slow sip while I processed the familiar ache of exclusion. 2 years at TechFlow, and I still felt like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Not that I'd ever actually been welcomed in the first place. During my interview, Brandon had seemed impressed by my portfolio, asking thoughtful questions about my coding philosophy and problem-solving approach. But the moment I'd started, something shifted. Maybe it was the way I preferred to work quietly rather than broadcasting every small victory. Maybe it was how I asked detailed questions in meetings while others nodded along without understanding. Or maybe it was simply that I didn't fit their image of what a developer should look like. The group dispersed, returning to their desks, with the satisfied energy of people who belonged somewhere. I watched Sophia gather her purse, a designer bag that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and touch up her lipstick in her phone camera. Brandon straightened his tie and checked his Apple Watch, playing the part of the successful team lead who had everything under control. The same team lead who'd spent the morning asking me to debug code that wouldn't have broken if he'd followed basic programming principles. My phone buzzed with a Slack notification, a message from Riley in our team channel. Lunch crew assembling. Thanks, Brandon, for organizing another awesome team meal. The champagne glass emoji that followed felt deliberately cheerful, like enthusiasm could paper over the obvious exclusion. I minimized Slack and opened my personal project folder. The app stared back at me, line after line of code that represented 18 months of late nights, weekend marathons, and the kind of deep focus that only came when you were building something truly revolutionary. I'd started it during my second month at TechFlow, after watching our team struggle with basic project management tasks that could have been automated. What began as a simple productivity tool had evolved into something far more sophisticated, an AI-powered platform that could predict project bottlenecks, optimize team workflows, and integrate seamlessly with existing development tools. The secret wasn't just that I'd built it. The secret was that it was already being tested by 3 Fortune 500 companies who'd found it through my carefully anonymous beta program. The secret was that venture capital firms had been reaching out through encrypted channels, trying to identify the mysterious developer behind what TechCrunch had called the most intuitive enterprise software solution in a decade. The secret was that yesterday, our own CEO, Marcus Thompson, had mentioned in a board meeting that TechFlow needed to find and acquire whatever company had built this revolutionary productivity platform, not knowing he was sitting 15 floors above its creator. I'd learned about the board meeting through Emma Williams, the new intern who'd started last month, and somehow managed to overhear everything important that happened in the executive break room. Emma reminded me of myself at 22, brilliant, but invisible, hungry for opportunity but too polite to demand it. She'd mentioned the CEO's comments in passing, not realizing their significance, just making conversation while we waited for the elevator. He seemed really excited about some app, Emma had said, shifting her laptop bag to her other shoulder. Said it could revolutionize how tech companies manage development cycles. Brandon was in the meeting too, apparently trying to convince everyone that our team could build something similar. She'd paused, then added with the kind of honesty that hadn't yet been beaten out of her by corporate politics. But honestly, based on what I've seen of our current project, I'm not sure we could build a to-do list that actually works. I'd smiled at that, agreeing with a non-committal nod while my mind raced through possibilities. Brandon in a board meeting, promising to deliver something he didn't understand, taking credit for capabilities he didn't possess. It was such a perfectly Brandon move that I almost admired its audacity. Now, sitting in my corner exile while my team planned another lunch without me, I pulled up the usage analytics for my app. The numbers were staggering. Daily active users had grown by 40% in the past month. Enterprise clients were reporting productivity increases of up to 30%. The AI learning algorithms were performing better than I'd dared hope, adapting to user patterns with an intuitive grace that felt almost organic. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Slack, but an encrypted message from Dr. Patricia Hayes, my former computer science professor at Stanford, and now my unofficial advisor on the app development. Patricia was one of only 3 people who knew about my project, and she'd been instrumental in connecting me with beta testers and providing feedback on the more complex algorithmic challenges. Board meeting intel suggests TechFlow is actively seeking acquisition targets in your space, the message read. Thompson specifically mentioned your app, though obviously doesn't know it's yours. Might be time to consider revealing your hand. The market timing couldn't be better. I stared at the message for a long moment, listening to the ambient sounds of office life around me. Keyboards clicking, phone conversations, the distant hum of the air conditioning system. Somewhere in this building, Marcus Thompson was probably in another meeting, discussing market opportunities and competitive advantages. not knowing that the solution he sought was sitting in his own office, ignored and excluded by the very team that claimed to be working on similar innovations. The lunch group had returned, their voices carrying that satisfied warmth that comes from good food and easy camaraderie. They settled back at their desks with the languid movements of people who'd taken their time, enjoyed themselves, belonged somewhere. Brandon loosened his tie slightly and rolled up his sleeves, the picture of relaxed leadership. Sophia touched up her lipstick again and checked her reflection in her monitor's black screen. Riley looked energized, probably from being included in whatever inside jokes and office gossip had dominated their conversation. I saved my work and stood up, needing to walk off the restless energy that always followed these moments of exclusion. The kitchen area was empty, thankfully, giving me space to heat up the salad I'd brought from home and pour myself a cup of coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see downtown Austin spreading out below, all glass towers and construction cranes reaching toward a cloudless sky. Emma appeared beside me, looking slightly overwhelmed in the way that all new interns did by their third week. She'd been assigned to shadow different team members, learning the development process from the ground up, but I could tell she was struggling to find her place in the existing social dynamics. "How was your lunch?" she asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean, I didn't see you leave with everyone else, so I assumed." "I usually eat at my desk," I said, which was true, but not the whole truth. "Gives me more time to focus on the code." Emma nodded, but I could see the question in her eyes. She was smart enough to pick up on the social undercurrents, observant enough to notice who got included and who didn't. "I brought a sandwich," she said finally. "Want to eat together? I mean, if you don't mind the company." Something about her earnest hopefulness reminded me of myself when I'd first started here, back when I still believed that good work would speak for itself, and inclusion was something you earned rather than something you were granted. "Sure," I said, but fair warning, I usually eat pretty quickly. We found a small table in the corner of the kitchen area, away from the main flow of foot traffic. Emma unpacked her lunch with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned to make every minute count, and I found myself studying her approach to problems, the way she thought through challenges. She reminded me of myself, but with something I'd lost somewhere along the way. The assumption that she belonged wherever her talent could take her. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said between bites of her sandwich. "And feel free to tell me. It's none of my business, but why do you always sit by yourself? I mean, your code is incredible. I've been looking at some of the modules you've written and they're like poetry, but it's like the team doesn't even see you." The question hung in the air between us, loaded with all the observations she'd made but hadn't voiced until now. I took a sip of coffee, buying time to figure out how to answer without revealing too much or sounding bitter. The truth was complicated, layered with months of small slights and quiet dismissals that had accumulated into something larger. "Sometimes it's easier to work when you're not constantly performing belonging," I said finally. "When you can just focus on the actual work instead of managing everyone else's perception of whether you fit." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma nodded slowly, like she was processing not just my words, but the entire social ecosystem she'd stumbled into. "But don't you want recognition for what you're building? I mean, some of the solutions you've implemented are way beyond what anyone else on the team could have designed." I smiled at her directness. "Recognition is tricky. Sometimes it's better to let your work speak for itself and wait for the right moment to step into the spotlight." What I didn't tell her was that I'd been waiting for that moment for 2 years, and it had never come. What I didn't tell her was that I'd stopped waiting and started building my own spotlight instead. What I didn't tell her was that in a few weeks, everything was going to change, and the people who'd spent so much energy excluding me were going to have to reckon with exactly what they'd overlooked. My phone buzzed with another encrypted message from Patricia. "CEO just announced." All hands meeting for Friday. Topic: strategic partnerships and innovation opportunities. Might want to attend this one. I looked up from my phone to find Emma watching me with curiosity. Important message? Could be, I said, closing the app. Could be exactly what I've been waiting for. Through the kitchen windows, I could see storm clouds gathering on the horizon, the kind of dramatic weather that made Austin feel electric with possibility. Inside the office, Brandon was holding court again, probably explaining to someone why the team lunch had been such a crucial bonding experience. Sophia was typing furiously, likely updating her LinkedIn with another humble brag about successful team collaboration. They had no idea that everything was about to shift. They had no idea that the quiet girl in the corner had been building something extraordinary while they'd been building walls. They had no idea that tomorrow's meeting was going to reveal exactly how much they'd underestimated the future that had been sitting right under their noses. I finished my salad and gathered my things, ready to return to my corner desk and the secret that was about to change everything. Emma walked back with me, chattering about code architecture and project management tools, her enthusiasm reminding me why I'd started building in the first place. Not for recognition or inclusion, but for the pure joy of creating something that could make everything work better. As I settled back into my chair and opened my editor, I allowed myself a small smile. Let them have their lunches and their insider jokes and their carefully curated team bonding. Let them continue to see me as invisible, harmless, unworthy of their table. Soon enough, they'd be fighting for a seat at mine. The elevator dinged softly as I stepped onto the 25th floor, a place I'd only been twice before during company orientation tours. The executive level felt different from our development floor, all polished marble and muted conversations, where even the air seemed to carry more weight. I clutched my laptop bag tighter, still processing Patricia's message about Marcus Thompson's board meeting comments. The CEO of TechFlow had specifically mentioned my app, describing it as revolutionary while sitting just 10 floors above the woman who'd built it. Emma had volunteered to cover my afternoon meetings, claiming she needed the practice presenting code reviews anyway. Her enthusiasm reminded me of myself before I learned that talent alone wasn't enough to guarantee recognition. I'd spent 18 months perfecting my productivity platform in secret, working nights and weekends while my team dismissed my contributions during regular office hours. Now, walking these pristine hallways where strategic decisions got made, I felt the familiar tension between visibility and safety. The executive break room was empty, except for the quiet hum of expensive coffee machines and the faint scent of leather from nearby conference rooms. I'd come here hoping to overhear more details about Thompson's acquisition plans, the same way Emma had stumbled onto yesterday's revelation. Sometimes the most important conversations happened in spaces where people assumed they couldn't be heard. I selected a green tea from the premium selection and settled into a chair positioned to observe without being obvious. My phone displayed the latest analytics from my app's dashboard, numbers that would have made Brandon's entire quarterly presentation look amateur. 300,000 active users across 12 countries, with retention rates that defied industry standards. The AI algorithms were learning faster than I'd projected, adapting to user patterns with an intuitive grace that still surprised me. Footsteps approached from the hallway, accompanied by voices I recognized from company all-hands meetings. Marcus. Thompson's distinctive baritone carried clearly as he entered with someone I didn't immediately place, probably another executive discussing the strategic partnerships Patricia had mentioned. The productivity metrics are unlike anything we've seen, Thompson was saying, settling into a chair across the room. Our enterprise clients are reporting efficiency gains that border on miraculous. Whatever company built this platform understands workplace dynamics better than teams with decades of experience. His companion, a woman with silver hair and designer glasses, nodded thoughtfully. The anonymity is intriguing, though. Most developers at this level want recognition, publicity, acquisition meetings. Why stay hidden when you're sitting on technology worth potentially hundreds of millions? I nearly choked on my tea, managing to muffle the sound behind my cup. Hundreds of millions. The figure felt abstract, like discussing the distance to distant galaxies, but Thompson's tone suggested he wasn't exaggerating. "That's what makes me think we're dealing with someone special," Thompson continued. "Someone who understands that the right timing matters more than immediate gratification. The kind of strategic thinking we desperately need more of here." The irony was almost painful. I'd spent 2 years watching Brandon take credit for solutions I'd quietly implemented, listening to Sophia explain concepts I'd mastered in graduate school, sitting in meetings where my suggestions were ignored until someone else repeated them minutes later. The strategic thinking Thompson admired was born from necessity, developed by someone who'd learned to work around systems that consistently overlooked her contributions. "What about internal development?" the woman asked. "Surely our teams could build something comparable, given enough resources and time." Thompson laughed, but not with humor. "I sat through a presentation yesterday where our mobile development lead promised to deliver a competitive solution within 6 months. Based on what I've seen of their current project timeline, I'd be surprised if they could replicate basic functionality within a year. Sometimes you have to admit when external innovation has leapfrogged your internal capabilities." I thought about Brandon's confident presentation style. The way he could make incomplete features sound revolutionary with the right PowerPoint transitions and industry buzzwords. He'd probably spent hours preparing slides that promised capabilities he didn't understand, backed by timelines that ignored basic software development realities. The same man who'd excluded me from lunch planning was promising to build something that already existed 15 floors below his feet. My phone buzzed with a message from Riley. "Team meeting in conference room B in 10 minutes. Brandon wants to discuss the new project roadmap." The notification felt surreal given the conversation happening across the room, where Thompson was discussing acquisition budgets and strategic partnerships, while my actual team planned to reinvent what I'd already perfected. I finished my tea and gathered my things, careful not to draw attention as Thompson and his colleague continued their discussion. Walking back toward the elevator, I heard Thompson mention Friday's all-hands meeting, something about announcing major strategic initiatives and introducing key partnership opportunities. The timing aligned perfectly with Patricia's intelligence, suggesting that whatever announcement was coming would reshape TechFlow's entire development strategy. Conference Room B buzzed with the familiar energy of people pretending to be more productive than they actually were. Brandon stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, wearing the expression of someone about to reveal profound insights. Sophia sat in her usual spot at the head of the table, laptop open but clearly focused on Brandon's presentation. Riley had claimed a seat near the window, notebook ready, eager to capture whatever wisdom was about to be dispensed. I took my usual chair at the far end of the table, close enough to participate but distant enough to observe without disrupting their established dynamics. Emma slipped in just behind me, looking slightly overwhelmed by the formal meeting atmosphere, but determined to absorb everything. "All right, team," Brandon began, his voice carrying that particular confidence that came from successful lunch networking and executive approval. "I've got some exciting news from yesterday's board meeting. Management has identified a significant market opportunity in enterprise productivity solutions, and they've chosen our team to lead TechFlow's response." Sophia leaned forward, already formulating questions that would demonstrate her strategic thinking. "What kind of timeline are we looking at? And what's the competitive landscape like?" Brandon smiled like he'd been hoping for exactly that question. "The challenge is significant. There's apparently some mystery app that's been dominating the enterprise market. Setting standards will need to match or exceed. But here's the thing. Whoever built it clearly doesn't understand corporate development processes. They're operating in stealth mode, probably because they know they can't compete with established companies once we bring our full resources to bear." I kept my expression neutral while internally marveling at his confidence. The mystery app he was dismissing had been built by someone sitting 10 feet away, someone whose contributions he'd been overlooking for 2 years. The stealth mode he interpreted as weakness was actually strategic patience, waiting for exactly the right moment to reveal capabilities that would reshape industry standards. "What kind of resources are we talking about?" Riley asked, her pen poised over her notebook. "Additional developers, extended timeline, budget for external consultants?" "Full support," Brandon replied, drawing circles and arrows on the whiteboard that were probably meant to represent innovative thinking. Thompson specifically mentioned that this project has executive priority. "Whatever we need to build something revolutionary, we'll get." Emma raised her hand tentatively, the gesture highlighting her newness to these team dynamics. "Do we have access to the competitor app? It might help to understand what we're trying to improve upon." Brandon waved the suggestion away with casual authority. "Better to approach this with fresh perspectives. If we start by copying what already exists, we'll never achieve true innovation. Our job is to think beyond current limitations and build something genuinely transformative." The irony was almost overwhelming. Brandon was rejecting the opportunity to study my app while simultaneously promising to build something better, not knowing that the creator of his competitive benchmark was documenting every word of his ambitious promises. I wondered what he'd think if he knew that his revolutionary project timeline was competing against 18 months of completed development and real-world testing. "What about user research?" Sophia suggested, clearly positioning herself as the strategic voice on the team. "Enterprise productivity is complex, with varying needs across different corporate structures. We'll need extensive user interviews and workflow analysis." I thought about the hundreds of user feedback sessions I'd already conducted, the countless hours spent analyzing corporate workflow patterns and testing optimization algorithms. My app's success came from understanding exactly the complexities Sophia was just beginning to consider, insights gathered through direct engagement with the enterprise clients who were already transforming their operations using my platform. Brandon nodded approvingly at Sophia's suggestion, adding more arrows to his whiteboard diagram. "Exactly the kind of thinking that's going to set us apart. We'll need to understand corporate psychology, team dynamics, productivity bottlenecks that our competitors probably never considered." Riley scribbled notes furiously, trying to capture every strategic insight while Emma watched the discussion with the careful attention of someone learning how corporate innovation was supposed to work. I found myself studying their faces, wondering how they'd react when they discovered that their ambitious 6-month timeline was attempting to recreate something that was already generating revenue and transforming enterprise operations. "Timeline-wise," Brandon continued, "I've committed to demonstrating significant progress within 6 months, with a full beta release by the end of the year. Aggressive, but that's what separates market leaders from followers. 6 months to build what I'd perfected over 18. The mathematics were almost insulting, suggesting that my careful development process, user testing, and algorithmic refinement could be replicated by a team that couldn't manage basic project coordination. Without external intervention, I thought about the complexity hidden beneath my app's intuitive interface, the machine learning models that had required months of training, the integration challenges that had kept me awake for countless nights. My phone displayed another encrypted message from Patricia. "Industry contacts confirm Thompson is fast-tracking acquisition discussions. Multiple venture capital firms have reached out asking about the anonymous productivity platform. Market speculation suggests imminent announcement." The message added urgency to decisions I'd been postponing for months. Remaining anonymous had protected me from corporate politics and allowed my app to succeed based purely on merit, but it also meant watching other people take credit for innovations they couldn't understand, let alone replicate. "Alex," Brandon said suddenly, his voice pulling me back to the conference room, "you've been quiet. Any thoughts on our development approach?" The question felt loaded with the casual dismissal I'd grown accustomed to, framed as inclusion but delivered with the expectation of minimal contribution. Everyone turned toward me. waiting for whatever small insight the quiet corner desk developer might offer to their ambitious strategic planning. I looked around the table, taking in their expectant faces, their confident assumptions about market opportunities and development timelines. Emma watched with genuine curiosity, probably wondering why someone with my technical skills seemed so peripheral to important strategic discussions. Sophia's expression carried that particular patience successful people reserved for less significant contributions. Riley held her pen ready, prepared to document whatever modest observation I might add to their innovative thinking. I think understanding existing solutions might be more valuable than you realize, I said carefully. Sometimes the best innovation comes from recognizing what's already working and asking why current users are so satisfied with their existing tools. Brandon nodded with the polite condescension reserved for suggestions that miss the bigger picture. That's thinking like a developer, Alex, but we need to think like visionaries. The market doesn't need incremental improvements. It needs revolutionary leaps forward. Revolutionary leaps forward. I almost smiled at the phrase, delivered. With such confidence by someone who'd never built anything more revolutionary than a basic mobile interface. The revolutionary leap he was describing already existed, already served hundreds of thousands of users, already generated metrics that made his quarterly reports look elementary. Sophia leaned back in her chair, clearly ready to provide more strategic context. Alex raises an interesting point about user satisfaction, but we also have to consider that satisfied users don't always recognize their unmet needs. True innovation means anticipating requirements that people don't even know they have yet. I nodded politely while thinking about the user feedback loops I'd built into my platform. The behavioral analytics that identified unmet needs faster. Then traditional survey methods, the predictive algorithms that anticipated user requirements before users themselves recognized them. Sophia was describing challenges I'd already solved while positioning herself as the visionary who could guide the team toward breakthrough insights. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, covering resource allocation, milestone planning, and team role assignments that positioned me as the technical implementer for other people's strategic vision. I took notes and asked clarifying questions, playing the part of the reliable developer who could be counted on to execute ambitious plans conceived by more innovative minds. As the meeting dispersed, Emma lingered near my chair, clearly processing everything she'd observed. That sounded like a really exciting project, she said, but her tone suggested questions she wasn't sure how to ask. Exciting projects usually are, I replied, gathering my laptop and notepad. The challenge is making sure the excitement translates into realistic execution. Emma walked with me toward the elevator, her expression thoughtful. Can I ask you something? And please tell me if I'm completely wrong about this. But sometimes it feels like the team doesn't really see what you're capable of. Like, your code is obviously more sophisticated than anything else I've seen here, but in meetings you're treated like a junior developer. The observation was astute and uncomfortable, highlighting dynamics I'd learned to navigate but never addressed directly. Emma was too new to understand the complex social calculus that kept talented people in supporting roles, while less capable colleagues claimed leadership positions. Corporate dynamics are complicated, I said as we waited for the elevator. Sometimes, it's more strategic to let people underestimate your capabilities while you focus on building something that speaks for itself. The elevator arrived and we stepped inside, the quiet hum of movement giving weight to Emma's next question. But what if what you're building never gets the recognition it deserves? What if people keep taking credit for work you're doing behind the scenes? I thought about Thompson's board meeting comments, about Patricia's intelligence regarding acquisition discussions, about the Friday all-hands meeting that could change everything. Sometimes recognition comes when you least expect it, I said. And sometimes the people who've been overlooking your contributions suddenly realize they've been sitting next to exactly what they've been searching for. Emma studied my face, clearly trying to decode the subtext in my response. That sounds like you're planning something. The elevator doors opened onto our development floor, revealing the familiar landscape of cubicles and corner desks where innovation was supposed to happen, but rarely did. Brandon was already back at his workstation, probably updating his project management software with optimistic timelines and revolutionary objectives. Sophia had claimed a conference room for what appeared to be strategic planning, her laptop, displaying the kind of market analysis that looked impressive but ignored practical implementation challenges. "I'm always planning something," I told Emma as we walked toward our desks. "The question is whether anyone will notice when it matters." My corner desk felt different now, less like exile and more like a strategic observation post. I could see the entire team from here, watch them navigate their ambitious project plans while remaining unaware that the solution they sought was being refined just a few feet away. My phone displayed new user analytics that would have made Brandon's presentation look amateur. Retention metrics that proved user satisfaction wasn't just about meeting current needs, but anticipating future requirements. I opened my private development environment and began implementing the final features I'd been saving for exactly this moment. Advanced integration protocols that would make corporate adoption seamless, predictive analytics that would revolutionize project management workflows, user interface improvements that would set new industry standards for intuitive design. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my team planned to reinvent enterprise productivity solutions, I was perfecting the platform that would soon make their ambitious timeline look embarrassingly optimistic. They'd excluded me from lunch planning because they didn't think I belonged at their table. Soon enough, they'd realize that I'd been building the table they'd all be hoping to join. Thompson's Friday announcement was 3 days away. Patricia's intelligence suggested major strategic revelations that would reshape TechFlow's development. Priorities. My app's user base continued growing exponentially, while my team remained unaware that their competitive benchmark was sitting in their own office. I allowed myself a small smile as I coded, each keystroke bringing me closer to the moment when invisible would become undeniable. When the quiet corner desk developer would step into the spotlight she'd been building in secret. Let them have their team lunches and strategic planning sessions. Let them continue seeing me as the reliable technical support for their innovative vision. Friday was going to be very interesting. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Austin weather that made everything feel possible. I sat in my car outside TechFlow's downtown headquarters, watching early commuters stream through the glass doors, while my phone displayed notifications that would have sent shockwaves through the building if anyone knew their source. Overnight, my productivity platform had been featured in 3 major tech publications, described as the most innovative enterprise solution to emerge in years. The articles carefully preserved my anonymity, but venture capital firms were reportedly offering acquisition packages that started with 9 figures. I climbed out of my Honda Civic, the same reliable car that my teammates occasionally joked about in the parking garage, and walked toward the elevator bank. The contrast wasn't lost on me that while they speculated about my financial limitations, investors were competing to fund the company I'd built in my spare time. Emma was waiting by the elevator, clutching a coffee cup and looking slightly overwhelmed by something she'd discovered. "Alex?" she said, her voice carrying excitement mixed with confusion. "Did you see the TechCrunch article about that productivity app everyone's talking about? The one that's apparently revolutionizing enterprise workflows?" I pressed the elevator button and tried to keep my expression neutral. "I saw some headlines. Sounds like impressive technology." Emma pulled out her phone and scrolled through the article, her enthusiasm building as she read. Listen to this quote from the CEO of Morrison Industries. "This platform has transformed how our teams collaborate. We've seen productivity increases of 35% across all departments, with project completion times reduced by nearly half." 35%, Alex. That's incredible. The elevator arrived and we stepped inside, Emma continuing to read while I processed the surreal experience of hearing my work praised by someone who had no idea she was standing next to its creator. Morrison Industries had been one of my first enterprise beta testers, a company whose complex workflow challenges had helped me refine several key features. The weird thing is, Emma continued as we rode up to the 15th floor, nobody knows who built it. The app is registered under some anonymous LLC, and the developer hasn't done any interviews or public appearances. In today's startup culture, that's almost unheard of. I thought about the strategic decisions that had led to this anonymity, the careful legal structures Patricia had helped me establish to protect both my intellectual property and my professional flexibility. Remaining invisible had allowed my app to succeed purely on merit, while giving me time to observe how the tech industry actually worked versus how it claimed to work. Maybe they have good reasons for staying private, I suggested as the elevator opened onto our floor. Sometimes the best innovations happen away from the spotlight. The development area hummed with unusual energy, conversations more animated than typical Thursday morning discussions. I could see Brandon near the coffee station, gesturing enthusiastically while several team members clustered around him. Sophia stood nearby, her laptop open to what appeared to be market research, probably analyzing the same articles Emma had been reading. "Team huddle in 5 minutes," Riley called out as we passed her desk. "Brandon wants to discuss some new developments in our competitive landscape." I settled into my corner desk and opened my workstation, pulling up the private analytics dashboard that tracked my app's performance in real time. The numbers were staggering even by my optimistic projections. Daily active users had spiked following the media coverage, with enterprise adoption accelerating beyond my initial growth models. The AI algorithms were processing workflow patterns from thousands of companies, learning and adapting at a pace that validated years of theoretical development. My encrypted communication app chimed with a message from Patricia. "Board meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Thompson wants to discuss acquisition strategy for the productivity platform. Your reveal timing couldn't be more perfect." The irony was almost overwhelming. While my team prepared to analyze my app as their primary competitor, Thompson was planning to acquire the same technology, unaware that its creator was sitting 15 floors below, excluded from lunch meetings and treated as junior technical support. "All right, everyone," Brandon announced, calling the team together near the whiteboard area. "I've been monitoring market developments, and there have been some significant changes in our competitive environment." I joined the group, standing slightly behind the core team members who automatically formed the inner circle of Brandon's impromptu presentations. Emma positioned herself where she could observe both Brandon's explanation and the team's reactions, her natural curiosity making her an excellent barometer for office dynamics. Brandon pulled up several browser tabs on the large monitor, displaying the same articles Emma had been reading. This productivity platform that's been generating buzz, it's more sophisticated than we initially thought. The user testimonials and feature descriptions suggest capabilities that could challenge our entire development approach. Sophia leaned forward, already formulating strategic responses. "What kind of specific features are we talking about? And how do we know these aren't just marketing exaggerations?" "The AI integration appears to be genuine," Brandon replied, clicking through screenshots of user interfaces that I recognized as my own design work. "Predictive workflow optimization, automated bottleneck detection, seamless integration with existing enterprise tools. If these capabilities are real, we're not just competing with another productivity app. We're competing with a fundamentally different approach to workplace efficiency." I watched my teammates analyze my work with the intensity of archaeologists examining ancient artifacts, trying to decode innovations they couldn't quite comprehend. The features they were describing as revolutionary had been my starting point 18 months ago. Basic functionality I'd built before moving on to more sophisticated capabilities they hadn't even discovered yet. "Here's what concerns me," Brandon continued, his tone shifting to the serious leadership voice he used for important strategic discussions. "The anonymous nature of this platform suggests either extreme confidence or significant backing. People don't stay hidden unless they're planning something big. Riley raised her hand, clearly struggling to process the implications. So are we still targeting a 6-month development timeline? Because if this is the standard we're trying to match. The question hung in the air, carrying the weight of promised delivery dates and executive expectations that suddenly seemed optimistically ambitious. I found myself genuinely curious about how Brandon would navigate this collision between his confident presentations and the reality of what actually needed to be built. "We adapt," Brandon said firmly, adding new arrows to his whiteboard diagram. "Innovation means finding approaches that others haven't considered. We use this intelligence to inform our strategy, not intimidate us into conservative thinking." Sophia nodded approvingly, positioning herself as the strategic ally who understood the bigger picture. Exactly. Understanding the competitive landscape means identifying opportunities for differentiation. What can we build that goes beyond current market solutions? I almost laughed at the suggestion that they could build beyond what I'd already created, especially considering their current project was still struggling with basic functionality I'd mastered years ago. But I maintained my neutral expression, taking notes and asking occasional clarifying questions that positioned me as the diligent implementer of their innovative vision. "Alex," Brandon said suddenly, turning his attention toward me with the kind of forced inclusion that highlighted rather than masked my peripheral status. "You've been analyzing the technical specifications. What's your assessment of the development complexity?" The question created an interesting moment of cognitive dissonance. Brandon was asking me to evaluate the difficulty of building something I'd already built, to assess whether his ambitious timeline could deliver capabilities I'd been refining for over a year. I looked around the room, taking in their expectant faces, their confidence that 6 months of focused development could match or exceed what anonymous competitors had achieved. The AI integration alone would require significant machine learning expertise, I said carefully. The kind of predictive analytics they're describing needs extensive training data and sophisticated algorithms. Building that from scratch, while maintaining the user experience standards they've apparently achieved, would be challenging within any timeline. Brandon nodded with the patient understanding of a leader who appreciated technical input, but wasn't limited by technical constraints. Challenging but not impossible. Remember, we have advantages that smaller competitors don't: corporate resources, established user bases, proven development processes. I thought about my lean development approach, the efficiency that came from building without committee oversight or corporate bureaucracy. My app had succeeded precisely because it avoided the proven development processes Brandon was describing, the layers of approval and strategic alignment that slowed innovation to corporate pace. "What about user research?" Emma asked, her question highlighting gaps in their strategic planning. "If we're trying to compete with something that apparently understands enterprise workflows this well, shouldn't we be studying how they achieved that understanding?" Sophia smiled with the confidence of someone who'd anticipated exactly this question. "We're planning comprehensive user interviews and workflow analysis. The advantage of being second to market is learning from others' mistakes while building on their innovations." The assumption that my app represented mistakes to learn from rather than solutions to understand demonstrated exactly why their ambitious timeline was doomed to fail. They were approaching development like a reverse engineering project, confident that superior corporate resources could replicate innovations they couldn't fully comprehend. My phone buzzed with another message from Patricia. Thompson's assistant called. "CEO wants to fast-track acquisition discussions. Industry speculation suggests the anonymous platform might announce major partnerships or funding rounds soon." The timing was perfect and terrifying simultaneously. I'd spent months planning for this moment, but the reality of corporate machinery moving toward acquisition decisions created pressure I'd only theorized about. Thompson was preparing to spend potentially hundreds of millions acquiring technology that was sitting in his own building, developed by someone his management team consistently overlooked. "Timeline revision," Brandon announced, adding new elements to his increasingly complex whiteboard diagram. Given competitive pressures, I'm recommending we accelerate our development schedule. Demonstrate working prototypes within 4 months, beta release by end of Q3. 4 months instead of 6. The mathematical impossibility was almost insulting, suggesting that careful engineering and user testing could be compressed through sheer determination and corporate prioritization. I watched Riley frantically update her project timeline while Sophia nodded approvingly at the aggressive strategic positioning. "What about resource allocation?" Emma asked, clearly trying to understand how shortened timelines aligned with increased complexity. "If we're building more sophisticated features in less time, don't we need additional development support?" Brandon's smile suggested he'd been waiting for exactly this question. "I've been authorized to expand the team. We'll be hiring 2 senior developers and a UX specialist within the next month. Plus, I'm hoping to bring in some consulting expertise for the AI integration components. Additional developers to build what I'd already built. UX specialists to design interfaces I'd already perfected. AI consultants to implement algorithms I'd already deployed successfully." The resource allocation represented hundreds of thousands of dollars spent recreating innovations that were sitting 15 floors below Thompson's office. "Who's going to lead the technical architecture?" Sophia asked, clearly positioning herself for expanded responsibilities within the growing project scope. "I'll be handling overall technical direction," Brandon replied. "But I want each team member to take ownership of specific feature areas. Alex, I'm thinking the AI integration might be a good fit for your development background." The suggestion that I should take ownership of AI integration for my own app created another moment of surreal irony. Brandon was essentially asking me to rebuild what I'd already built, to solve problems I'd already solved, to implement features I'd already deployed to hundreds of thousands of users. "I'd be interested in that," I said, maintaining the tone of someone grateful for expanded responsibilities rather than someone who could implement the entire platform single-handedly. The machine learning components sound particularly challenging. Emma raised her hand again, her natural curiosity leading her toward questions that highlighted uncomfortable gaps in their planning. "Do we have any direct access to the competitor platform? It seems like hands-on experience would help us understand what we're trying to improve upon." Brandon waved the suggestion away with casual authority. "Better to approach this with fresh perspectives. If we start by copying existing solutions, we'll never achieve true innovation. Our job is to think beyond current limitations." The repeated rejection of studying my app while simultaneously trying to compete with it demonstrated a kind of willful ignorance that almost guaranteed failure. They were planning to innovate beyond limitations they refused to understand, building improvements to functionality they wouldn't examine. "What about corporate partnerships?" Riley asked, clearly thinking through business development implications. "If this anonymous platform is getting the kind of enterprise adoption these articles suggest, shouldn't we be considering similar partnership strategies?" Sophia's expression brightened, clearly recognizing an opportunity to demonstrate strategic thinking. "Absolutely. We should be identifying potential pilot programs with existing corporate clients. Beta testing within friendly enterprise environments could give us the user feedback we need while building market momentum." I thought about the extensive beta testing program I'd already conducted, the months of user feedback and workflow optimization that had informed every design decision in my platform. They were planning to recreate research I'd already completed while working within corporate constraints that would slow their progress to a crawl. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, covering resource allocation, milestone planning, and team responsibilities that positioned everyone for expanded roles within Brandon's ambitious project. I took notes and asked appropriate questions, playing the part of the reliable developer who could be counted on to implement strategic vision conceived by more innovative minds. As the group dispersed, I noticed Emma lingering near the whiteboard, studying Brandon's complex diagram of arrows and circles that were supposed to represent breakthrough innovation. Her expression carried the thoughtful confusion of someone trying to reconcile ambitious promises with practical implementation realities. "Exciting project?" I said, joining her near the whiteboard. Emma nodded slowly, but her tone suggested reservations she wasn't sure how to articulate. "It definitely sounds ambitious. I'm just wondering about the timeline. Building AI-powered enterprise software in 4 months seems like it might be optimistic." The understatement was almost endearing. Emma's fresh perspective allowed her to recognize impossibilities that corporate experience had trained everyone else to ignore. She hadn't yet learned that questioning ambitious timelines was discouraged in favor of positive thinking and strategic alignment. "Ambitious timelines can drive innovation," I replied diplomatically. "Sometimes external pressure forces breakthrough thinking that wouldn't happen under normal development schedules." Emma studied my face, clearly trying to understand how someone with my technical background could sound optimistic about what appeared to be an impossible project. But what if the breakthrough thinking isn't enough? What if 4 months just isn't realistic for this kind of complexity? I looked around the office, taking in the familiar landscape of cubicles and conference rooms where corporate innovation was supposed to happen. Brandon was already back at his workstation, probably updating project management software with optimistic milestones. Sophia had claimed a conference room for strategic planning, her laptop displaying market analysis that ignored practical constraints. "Sometimes reality has a way of adjusting ambitious expectations," I said finally. "The question is whether people recognize those adjustments before or after they become obvious to everyone else." My phone displayed another encrypted message from Patricia. "Thompson announced emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Acquisition strategy being fast-tracked. Your timing window is closing rapidly." The message added urgency to decisions I'd been postponing for months. Tomorrow's board meeting would determine TechFlow's approach to acquiring my platform, while my team remained unaware that their competitive analysis was being conducted 15 feet away from the technology they were trying to understand. I returned to my corner desk and opened my private development environment, implementing final optimizations I'd been saving for exactly this moment. Advanced analytics dashboards that would demonstrate user engagement beyond industry standards. Integration protocols that would make corporate adoption seamless. Performance improvements that would set new benchmarks for enterprise software efficiency. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my team planned to innovate beyond current market limitations, I was perfecting the platform that had already redefined those limitations. Tomorrow's board meeting would reveal Thompson's acquisition strategy for technology that was sitting in his own building, developed by someone his management team had consistently excluded from strategic discussions. Friday's all-hands meeting was less than 24 hours away. My app's user base continued growing exponentially while generating revenue that would soon make TechFlow's quarterly projections look modest. The anonymous platform Brandon was analyzing belonged to the quiet developer he'd never invited to lunch, never included in strategic planning, never recognized as capable of innovation beyond basic technical implementation. I allowed myself a moment of anticipation as I coded, each keystroke bringing me closer to revelations that would reshape every assumption my teammates had made about corporate hierarchy, technical capability, and the value of recognizing talent, regardless of its packaging. Let them continue planning to reinvent what I'd already perfected. Let them maintain their confident timelines and strategic positioning. Tomorrow was going to change everything. Friday morning dawned gray and humid, the kind of Austin weather that preceded summer storms. I arrived at TechFlow 30 minutes early, my laptop bag containing printed documentation that would soon transform every assumption my colleagues had made about innovation, capability, and the consequences of systematic exclusion. The building felt different somehow, charged with the anticipation of Marcus Thompson's all-hands meeting and the revelations that would follow. Emma was already at her desk, surrounded by printouts and sticky notes, clearly preparing for our team's accelerated development project. She looked up as I passed, her expression mixing excitement with the overwhelmed energy of someone trying to absorb corporate strategy faster than experience typically allowed. "Did you see the latest news about that productivity platform?" she asked, holding up her phone. "Forbes just published an analysis calling it the most disruptive enterprise software innovation in a decade. They're estimating the company's valuation in the hundreds of millions." I set down my coffee and tried to maintain neutral curiosity, while processing the surreal experience of hearing my work discussed as an external market force. "The anonymous developer is certainly getting attention." Emma nodded enthusiastically, scrolling through the article. "What's interesting is how they've managed to stay completely private while building something this successful. Usually, founders at this level are giving interviews, attending conferences, building personal brands. This person has deliberately avoided all publicity. The strategic decision to remain anonymous had protected me from exactly the kind of corporate politics I was navigating now, but it also meant watching other people analyze my innovations without recognizing their source. Emma's fascination with the mystery developer created an almost painful irony, considering she was sitting 15 feet away from the person she was trying to understand. "Maybe they know something about timing that others don't," I suggested, opening my workstation and pulling up files that would soon reveal exactly how much strategic thinking had informed 18 months of careful planning. Brandon's voice carried across the office as he emerged from an early morning meeting, his energy elevated beyond typical Friday enthusiasm. He moved through the development area with purposeful urgency, clearly processing information that had shifted his understanding of our competitive landscape. "Team meeting in conference room B now," he announced, his tone suggesting developments that couldn't wait for scheduled discussions. "We've got some significant updates about our project timeline and strategic positioning." I gathered my notepad and followed the group toward the conference room, observing how quickly corporate dynamics could shift when external pressures demanded immediate responses. Sophia moved with predatory efficiency, clearly anticipating opportunities to demonstrate strategic leadership. Riley clutched her project planning materials, probably calculating how new information would affect their carefully constructed development schedules. Conference Room B felt more charged than usual, Brandon's typical confidence now tinged with the kind of urgency that came from unexpected competitive intelligence. He stood at the whiteboard with multiple browser tabs open on the presentation monitor, displaying market analysis that had apparently arrived during his morning meetings. "I've just finished a briefing with Thompson's office," Brandon began, his voice carrying the weight of executive access and insider information. The board meeting this morning focused entirely on the productivity platform that's been dominating tech coverage. Management has decided to accelerate our competitive response significantly. Sophia leaned forward, positioning herself as the strategic partner who could navigate whatever complexities were about to be revealed. "What kind of acceleration are we talking about? And what new intelligence do we have about the competitive landscape?" Brandon clicked through several slides that displayed user testimonials, feature analyses, and market projections that made their previous planning look elementary. "The platform isn't just successful," he said, his tone mixing admiration with strategic concern. "It's redefining industry standards. Enterprise clients are reporting productivity improvements that were previously considered impossible." I watched my teammates process information about my app with the intensity of military strategists analyzing enemy capabilities. The testimonials Brandon was reading came from companies I'd worked with directly, users whose feedback had informed every design decision and feature optimization over the past year. "Here's what's particularly concerning," Brandon continued, highlighting specific functionality descriptions that I recognized as core features I'd spent months perfecting. "The AI integration isn't just sophisticated, it's intuitive. Users are achieving complex workflow optimizations without technical training. That suggests either breakthrough interface design or algorithmic capabilities that exceed current industry standards." Emma raised her hand, her natural curiosity leading her toward questions that highlighted gaps in their understanding. Do we have any information about the development team? The technical architecture behind these capabilities? Brandon shook his head with frustration that was becoming increasingly familiar. Complete anonymity. The platform is registered through legal structures that obscure ownership, development location, even basic corporate information. Whoever built this understands both technology and business strategy at a level that suggests significant experience. The description of my careful legal planning, guided by Patricia's expertise in intellectual property protection, sounded ominous when filtered through Brandon's competitive analysis. I'd structured my company specifically to maintain flexibility while building toward exactly this moment, when anonymity would transform into strategic revelation. "What about our development timeline?" Riley asked, clearly struggling to reconcile. Ambitious promises with expanding competitive complexity. If this is the standard we're trying to match, 4 months seems increasingly optimistic. The question created visible tension in Brandon's confident leadership persona. He'd promised executives a competitive response within accelerated timelines, but market intelligence was revealing capabilities that suggested his estimates had been dramatically inadequate. "We adapt our approach," Brandon replied, adding new arrows to his whiteboard diagram with the kind of determined optimism that ignored practical constraints. "Innovation means finding solutions that others haven't considered. We leverage our corporate advantages to build something that goes beyond current market offerings." I almost smiled at the suggestion that corporate advantages could overcome the fundamental challenges of building sophisticated AI-powered software from scratch. My app had succeeded precisely because it avoided corporate development processes, the layers of approval and strategic alignment that slowed innovation to bureaucratic pace. Sophia nodded approvingly, clearly recognizing opportunities to position herself as the strategic visionary who could guide the team through complex challenges. "Exactly. We use competitive intelligence to inform differentiation strategies. What capabilities can we develop that this anonymous platform hasn't considered?" The assumption that I hadn't considered capabilities they might develop demonstrated exactly why their competitive analysis was fundamentally flawed. They were analyzing my work as a static target, rather than recognizing it as an actively evolving platform that anticipated market needs faster than traditional development cycles. "Alex," Brandon said suddenly, turning his attention toward me, with the kind of forced inclusion that highlighted my peripheral status. "You've been studying the technical specifications. What's your assessment of our ability to match or exceed these capabilities within our revised timeline?" The question created another moment of cognitive dissonance, asking me to evaluate whether Brandon's team could build what I'd already built, to assess whether their ambitious timeline could deliver innovations I'd been refining for over a year. I looked around the room, taking in their expectant faces, their confidence that corporate resources could overcome any technical complexity. The machine learning components alone would require extensive development time, I said carefully. Building predictive algorithms that achieve the accuracy levels they're apparently demonstrating would need significant training data and algorithmic sophistication. Replicating that functionality while maintaining user experience standards would be challenging under any timeline. Brandon nodded with the patient understanding of a leader who appreciated technical input but wasn't constrained by technical limitations. Challenging, but not impossible. Remember, we have advantages that smaller competitors don't: established user bases for testing, corporate partnerships for data collection, proven development methodologies. I thought about my lean approach. To user testing, the direct feedback loops I'd built with enterprise clients who provided real-world usage data without corporate bureaucracy. My platform had succeeded by avoiding the proven methodologies Brandon was describing, the systematic processes that prioritize documentation over innovation. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Patricia. Board meeting concluded. Thompson announcing major strategic initiative at all hands. Acquisition budget approved for platform purchase. Your reveal timing is perfect. The message added immediate urgency to decisions I'd been planning for months. Thompson was preparing to announce acquisition strategies for my platform, while my team remained unaware that their competitive target was sitting 15 floors below his office, excluded from strategic discussions and treated as technical support. Resource allocation update, Brandon announced, displaying a new slide that outlined expanded team structure and budget authorizations. I've been approved to hire 4 additional senior developers, 2 UX specialists, and external consulting support for AI implementation. Whatever resources we need to build a competitive platform, we'll get. 4 additional developers to recreate what I'd built alone. UX specialists to design interfaces I'd already perfected through extensive user testing. AI consultants to implement algorithms I'd already deployed successfully across hundreds of enterprise clients. The resource allocation represented potentially millions of dollars spent rebuilding innovations that existed within their own office. Timeline specifics? Sophia asked, clearly positioning herself for expanded leadership responsibilities within the growing project scope. Functional prototype within 8 weeks, Brandon replied, his confidence suggesting he hadn't fully processed the complexity he was promising to deliver. Beta testing with select enterprise partners by end of quarter. Full market release before year-end. 8 weeks to build what had taken me 18 months to perfect. The mathematical impossibility was almost insulting, suggesting that careful engineering, user research, and algorithmic development could be compressed through determination and corporate resource allocation. Emma raised her hand again, her questions consistently highlighting uncomfortable gaps in their strategic planning. What about intellectual property considerations? If we're building something similar to this anonymous platform, how do we ensure we're not infringing on existing patents or proprietary technologies? The question created visible discomfort in Brandon's presentation flow. He'd been focused on competitive capabilities without considering the legal complexities of replicating innovations that were already deployed commercially. Legal review is part of our development process, Brandon replied with the kind of confident dismissal that suggested he hadn't actually consulted legal review. We'll be building original solutions that achieve similar outcomes through different technical approaches. I thought about the extensive patent portfolio Patricia had helped me file, the intellectual property protections that would make any attempt to reverse engineer my platform legally problematic. They were planning to build similar solutions without understanding the legal landscape they were entering. Team responsibility assignments, Brandon continued, displaying another slide that outlined role expansions for everyone in the room. Sophia will handle user research and enterprise partnership development. Riley will manage project coordination and timeline tracking. Alex, I want you to focus specifically on AI integration architecture. The assignment felt like cosmic justice, asking me to rebuild the AI capabilities I'd already implemented successfully while pretending I was starting from theoretical foundations. Brandon was essentially requesting that I recreate my own innovations, under corporate oversight, following development processes that would slow progress to bureaucratic pace. I'd be interested in that challenge, I said, maintaining the tone of someone grateful for expanded technical responsibilities rather than someone who could implement the entire platform immediately. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, covering resource allocation, milestone planning, and strategic positioning that assumed competitive capabilities could be replicated through superior corporate methodology. I took notes and asked appropriate questions, playing the part of the reliable developer who could execute ambitious vision conceived by more innovative leadership. As the group dispersed, Emma lingered near the conference table, studying Brandon's increasingly complex whiteboard diagrams with the expression of someone trying to reconcile ambitious promises with practical implementation realities. 8 weeks seems really aggressive, she said quietly, glancing around to ensure our conversation remained private. Building AI-powered enterprise software that competes with something this sophisticated. I mean, I'm new here, but that timeline seems almost impossible. Her assessment was accurate and refreshing, Coming from someone whose fresh perspective hadn't yet been shaped by corporate expectations, that ambitious promises could overcome technical complexity through positive thinking and resource allocation. Aggressive timelines can drive breakthrough innovation, I replied diplomatically. Sometimes external pressure forces creative solutions that wouldn't emerge under normal development schedules. Emma studied my face, clearly trying to understand how someone with my technical background could sound optimistic about what appeared to be an organizational commitment to impossible deliverables. But what happens if breakthrough innovation isn't enough? What if 8 weeks just isn't realistic for this level of complexity? I looked through the conference room windows toward the Austin skyline, where storm clouds were gathering for the afternoon weather that would match the revelations about to transform TechFlow's strategic assumptions. In a few hours, Thomson would announce his acquisition plans, while remaining unaware that the technology he sought was developed by someone his management team consistently overlooked. Sometimes reality adjusts ambitious expectations in ways that surprise everyone, I said finally. The question is whether people recognize those adjustments before they become obvious to the entire industry. My phone displayed another message from Patricia. All hands meeting moved to main auditorium, Thomson bringing special guests. Industry speculation suggests major announcement imminent. The change in venue indicated that Thomson's announcement would be more significant than typical strategic updates. Moving from conference rooms to the main auditorium suggested revelations that would affect every employee, not just development teams competing with anonymous platforms. I returned to my corner desk and opened my private development environment, implementing final preparations for revelations that would soon reshape every assumption my colleagues had made about innovation, capability, and the consequences of systematic exclusion. My analytics dashboard displayed user metrics that would make TechFlow's quarterly projections look modest, engagement statistics that proved enterprise software could achieve consumer-level adoption through intuitive design and predictive functionality. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my team planned to innovate beyond current market limitations, I was perfecting the platform that had already redefined those limitations. In 2 hours, Thomson would reveal his acquisition strategy for technology that was sitting 15 floors below his office, developed by someone his management team had never invited to strategic discussions, never included in lunch planning, never recognized as capable of building revolutionary solutions. Brandon was already updating project management software with optimistic milestones that assumed corporate resources could overcome any technical complexity. Sophia had claimed a conference room for strategic planning, probably developing research methodologies that would recreate insights I'd already gathered through direct enterprise engagement. Emma returned to her desk looking thoughtful, clearly processing the disconnect between ambitious promises and practical constraints that her fresh perspective allowed her to recognize. She'd been assigned to shadow different team members as part of her learning experience, which meant she'd soon discover exactly how much gap existed between strategic planning and actual implementation capability. I allowed myself a moment of anticipation as I saved my work, each file representing months of innovation that would soon transform from anonymous competitive threat to internal strategic asset. Thomson's announcement would reveal TechFlow's approach to acquiring revolutionary technology, while my teammates remained unaware that their lunch exclusion policies had systematically overlooked the very capabilities their company was desperate to obtain. The main auditorium was filling with employees from every department, the kind of company-wide gathering that typically preceded major strategic announcements or organizational changes. I could see Brandon near the front, probably positioning himself to ask insightful questions that would demonstrate his strategic thinking. Sophia had claimed a seat where she could be easily visible if networking opportunities emerged. In exactly 90 minutes, everything would change. The quiet corner desk developer who'd been excluded from team lunches would step into a spotlight that would make their ambitious development timelines look embarrassingly naive. The anonymous platform they'd been analyzing belonged to someone they'd never recognized as capable of innovation beyond basic technical support. Let them continue their strategic planning and resource allocation. Let them maintain their confident promises about building revolutionary software in 8 weeks. In 90 minutes, they'd discover that the revolution had already happened, built by someone they'd systematically underestimated while she sat just 15 feet away, coding the future they thought they were planning to create. The main auditorium buzzed with the kind of anticipatory energy that preceded major corporate announcements. I found a seat in the middle section, close enough to observe reactions but far enough from my team to maintain the anonymity that would soon end dramatically. Employees filled the tiered seating, conversations mixing speculation about strategic partnerships, potential acquisitions, and the productivity platform that had dominated tech headlines for the past week. Marcus Thompson stepped onto the stage with the confident presence of a CEO who was about to reshape his company's competitive position. He wore a navy suit that projected both authority and approachability, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd solved a complex strategic puzzle. Behind him, a presentation screen displayed the TechFlow logo alongside text that read, Innovation Partnership Initiative. "Thank you all for joining this special announcement," Thompson began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. "Today marks a significant milestone in TechFlow's evolution as a leader in enterprise technology solutions." I spotted Brandon and Sophia in the front section, clearly positioning themselves for visibility during what they probably assumed would be a strategic planning session relevant to their ambitious development project. Emma sat several rows behind them, her notebook ready to capture insights that would help her understand corporate decision-making processes. Thompson clicked to his first slide, which displayed market analysis highlighting the explosive growth in enterprise productivity solutions. The past month has demonstrated how quickly innovative platforms can reshape entire market segments. A single productivity application has generated more industry discussion than established solutions with decades of development history. The slide changed to display screenshots of my platform's interface, the same designs my team had been analyzing as competitive threats without recognizing their true origin. Seeing my work presented on Thompson's screen created a surreal moment of validation and anticipation, knowing that in minutes everyone would understand exactly where these innovations had originated. "This anonymous platform has achieved something remarkable," Thompson continued, highlighting user testimonials and adoption statistics that represented months of careful development and user engagement. Enterprise clients are reporting productivity improvements that exceed anything we've seen in our industry experience. The question facing every technology company is simple. How do we respond to innovation that has fundamentally raised market expectations? Brandon shifted in his seat, clearly processing implications for the ambitious timeline he'd promised executives just hours earlier. Sophia leaned forward, probably calculating how Thompson's announcement would affect her positioning within their development project. Neither seemed to recognize that their competitive analysis was about to become dramatically irrelevant. Traditional responses to competitive threats involve lengthy development cycles, significant resource allocation, and uncertain outcomes, Thompson said, advancing to a slide that displayed typical corporate innovation timelines. We could spend months or years attempting to replicate these capabilities, hoping to match innovations that are already transforming how enterprises approach workflow optimization. The auditorium remained quiet, employees processing the implications of Thompson's strategic assessment. I could see team leads and department managers exchanging glances, probably calculating how his announcement would affect their current project commitments and resource allocations. Or, Thompson said, pausing for emphasis, we could take a different approach. We could recognize exceptional innovation wherever it emerges and bring those capabilities directly into our organization. The slide changed to display a corporate acquisition announcement template, suggesting that Thompson was preparing to reveal a purchase agreement that would integrate the anonymous platform into TechFlow's existing technology portfolio. I felt my heart rate increase, knowing that the next few minutes would transform my carefully maintained anonymity into company-wide recognition. I'm pleased to announce that TechFlow has successfully identified and acquired the revolutionary productivity platform that has been setting new industry standards, Thompson declared, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a strategic victory. Effective immediately, we will be integrating these capabilities into our enterprise solutions portfolio. Applause rippled through the auditorium while my mind raced through the implications of Thompson's announcement. He'd somehow acquired my platform without my knowledge or consent, which suggested either a fundamental misunderstanding of my legal structures or information I hadn't been provided about corporate acquisition processes. Thompson raised his hand to quiet the applause, clearly preparing to reveal details that would clarify his acquisition strategy. What makes this partnership particularly special is that we didn't need to look outside our organization to find this revolutionary technology. The platform that has been transforming enterprise productivity was developed right here by one of our own team members. The auditorium fell silent, employees processing the revelation that their competitive threat had originated within their own company. I could see Brandon's face as he turned to scan the audience, probably trying to identify which developer had been secretly building revolutionary software while pretending to work on routine assignments. Alex Chen, Thompson announced, his voice carrying across the auditorium with clear authority. Could you please join me on stage? The moment felt suspended, hundreds of faces turning toward my section as I stood and began walking down the aisle toward the stage. I could hear whispered conversations, colleagues trying to process how the quiet developer from the corner desk had built something that venture capital firms were reportedly valuing in hundreds of millions. Emma's expression mixed shock with sudden understanding, probably connecting my diplomatic responses about innovation timing with the revelation that I'd been building exactly what our team was attempting to recreate. Brandon looked like he was processing a fundamental equation error. His confident competitive analysis suddenly revealed as plans to rebuild technology that already existed within his own team. Sophia's face displayed the particular confusion. That came from discovering that someone she'd consistently dismissed possessed capabilities that exceeded her own strategic planning. Riley stared with the wide-eyed amazement of someone realizing that revolutionary innovation had been happening 15 feet away while she'd been documenting ambitious timelines for recreating existing solutions. I climbed the steps to the stage, my legs steady despite the magnitude of the moment I'd been planning for 18 months. Thompson smiled and extended his hand, the gesture both welcoming and respectful, clearly recognizing that he was acknowledging someone whose contributions had fundamentally exceeded corporate expectations. Alex has been developing this platform during her own time, using resources and expertise that demonstrate exactly the kind of innovation thinking we want to cultivate throughout TechFlow, Thompson said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. Her work represents not just technical excellence, but strategic vision that anticipated market needs before our industry recognized them. The applause was more sustained this time, employees processing the revelation that revolutionary innovation could emerge from unexpected sources within their own organization. I stepped to the microphone, looking out over an auditorium filled with colleagues who had never recognized my capabilities, despite working alongside me for 2 years. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. Building this platform has been an incredible journey, one that taught me as much about organizational dynamics as it did about software development. I paused, letting my gaze move across the audience, taking in the faces of team members who had excluded me from lunch planning while I was building technology that would reshape their industry. Brandon sat motionless, probably calculating how his ambitious 8-week timeline compared to the 18 months I'd already invested in perfecting these capabilities. 2 years ago, I pitched an early version of this concept to my development team, I continued, the words carrying weight, that transformed past dismissals into present vindication. The feedback I received was that the idea wasn't realistic, that my approach was too ambitious for practical implementation, and that I should focus on supporting other people's innovative vision rather than pursuing my own. The auditorium remained silent, employees processing the implications of systematic dismissal that had nearly prevented TechFlow from benefiting from internal innovation that competitors were now desperate to acquire. That feedback taught me something valuable about timing and recognition, I said, advancing to a slide that displayed my platform's user growth statistics, numbers that would make their quarterly projections look modest. Sometimes the best innovations happen when you stop waiting for permission and start building solutions that speak for themselves. Emma was taking notes furiously, probably documenting lessons about corporate dynamics that weren't covered in orientation materials. Several department heads were leaning forward, clearly processing how internal talent recognition could be improved to prevent similar oversights in future innovation cycles. The platform currently serves over 400,000 active users across 15 countries, I continued, displaying analytics that demonstrated market penetration beyond anything TechFlow had achieved with existing products. Enterprise clients include Fortune 500 companies who have reported productivity improvements averaging 38% across all operational metrics. Brandon's expression had shifted from shock to what appeared to be grudging recognition of capabilities he'd consistently underestimated. Sophia looked like she was recalculating every interaction we'd had, probably wondering how many strategic insights she'd missed by dismissing contributions from someone she'd never considered, a competitive peer. Revenue projections for the next fiscal year exceed TechFlow's current annual enterprise software income, I said, advancing to financial projections that would transform departmental budget discussions. We're currently in negotiations with 3 additional Fortune 100 companies whose implementation timelines would accelerate our growth trajectory significantly. Thompson nodded approvingly, clearly satisfied with acquisition decisions that would enhance TechFlow's market position without requiring lengthy development cycles or uncertain competitive responses. Alex will be leading our new enterprise innovation division, with full authority to expand her platform and integrate her methodologies throughout our development processes. The promotion represented a complete reversal of corporate hierarchy, transforming the excluded corner desk developer into a division leader whose success would influence company-wide strategic direction. I could see department managers processing implications for their own teams, probably wondering how many other overlooked employees might possess capabilities that exceeded their current organizational recognition. I want to be clear about something, I said, returning to the microphone with information that would reshape how my colleagues understood the past 2 years of team dynamics. This platform wasn't built in spite of being excluded from strategic discussions and team activities. It was built because that exclusion gave me the space to focus on innovation without the constraints of committee oversight and consensus building. The statement carried implications beyond individual team dynamics, suggesting that corporate innovation processes might sometimes inhibit the breakthrough thinking they were designed to encourage. Several executives in the front rows exchanged glances, clearly processing feedback about organizational structures that could be improved. Every lunch meeting I wasn't invited to gave me additional development time. Every strategic discussion I was excluded from allowed me to focus on user research and algorithmic optimization instead of internal politics. Every assumption that I wasn't capable of innovation beyond basic technical support freed me to build something that redefined industry standards. Brandon looked uncomfortable, probably recognizing how his team leadership style had inadvertently created conditions that enabled exactly the innovation he'd been promising executives he could deliver through traditional development processes. Moving forward, the Enterprise Innovation Division will operate with methodologies that prioritize merit over hierarchy, solutions over politics, and results over process, I continued, outlining operational principles that would prevent future talent from being systematically overlooked. We'll be establishing internship programs, mentorship opportunities, and innovation challenges that ensure exceptional capabilities are recognized regardless of their source. Emma raised her hand from the audience, clearly emboldened by revelations that had transformed corporate power dynamics in ways that created new possibilities for contribution and recognition. Yes, Emma? I said, recognizing her eagerness to participate in discussions that would shape her professional development. Will there be opportunities for team members to transfer into the innovation division if they're interested in contributing to platform development? She asked, her question highlighting the career advancement possibilities that Thompson's announcement had created. Absolutely, I replied, noting that her question demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking the new division would cultivate. We'll be evaluating applications based on technical capabilities, innovative thinking, and collaborative potential rather than existing hierarchy or seniority. Several employees throughout the auditorium perked up, clearly interested in opportunities to contribute to revolutionary technology development under leadership that prioritized merit over corporate politics. Thompson returned to the microphone, preparing to conclude with information about implementation timelines and organizational changes that would integrate my platform throughout TechFlow's enterprise solutions. Alex's division will have autonomous development authority, dedicated budget allocation, and direct reporting relationships that ensure innovative projects receive support without bureaucratic delays. The announcement represented a fundamental shift in corporate structure, creating pathways for breakthrough innovation that bypassed traditional approval processes and committee oversight. I could see team leads processing implications for their own project management approaches, probably wondering how autonomous development authority might improve their delivery timelines. Questions about the platform, the acquisition, or the innovation division can be directed to Alex through normal communication channels, Thompson concluded. I expect this announcement will generate significant industry attention, so please coordinate any external communications through our public relations team. As the formal presentation ended and employees began filing out of the auditorium, I remained on stage to answer questions from colleagues who were still processing the magnitude of revelations that had transformed their understanding of internal capabilities and corporate recognition systems. Brandon approached the stage slowly, his expression mixing professional respect with personal embarrassment about misjudgments that had been revealed publicly. Alex, I want to apologize for not recognizing your capabilities earlier. The platform you've built is extraordinary, and I should have supported your initial presentation instead of dismissing it. His apology felt genuine, carrying the weight of someone who had learned important lessons about leadership, talent recognition, and the consequences of systematic exclusion. Thank you, Brandon. I think there are opportunities for everyone to learn from this experience and improve how we approach innovation and team dynamics. Sophia joined us, her typical confidence replaced by thoughtful humility that suggested she was processing feedback about strategic assumptions and collaborative relationships. I'd like to understand how you managed the user research and market analysis while maintaining your regular work responsibilities. The insights you gathered are incredibly sophisticated. Evenings, weekends, and lunch breaks that I wasn't invited to join, I replied with a smile that acknowledged past exclusions without lingering on their negative impact. Sometimes constraints force efficiency that wouldn't emerge under normal circumstances. Emma approached with her notebook, clearly eager to document lessons about innovation, persistence, and recognizing opportunities within apparent limitations. Would you be willing to mentor junior developers who are interested in building their own platforms or contributing to innovation projects? That's exactly what the innovation division is designed to support, I said, noting her enthusiasm and strategic thinking that would contribute significantly to future development projects. We'll be establishing formal mentorship programs within the next month. As colleagues continued approaching with questions, congratulations, and requests for collaboration, I felt the satisfaction of vindication earned through 18 months of patient development and strategic planning. The quiet corner desk developer who had been excluded from team lunches was now leading a division that would shape TechFlow's competitive position for years to come. Thompson joined our group, clearly pleased with acquisition decisions that had enhanced his company's market position while demonstrating internal talent recognition that would improve corporate culture throughout the organization. Alex, I'm scheduling a board presentation for next week where you'll outline expansion plans and resource requirements for the innovation division. The invitation to present strategic vision to TechFlow's board represented a complete transformation from peripheral technical support to central corporate leadership, responsibilities that would influence company direction and industry positioning. I'll prepare comprehensive projections and development roadmaps that demonstrate how our platform capabilities can be scaled across multiple market segments. As the auditorium emptied and conversations moved toward planning sessions and implementation discussions, I gathered my materials and prepared to return to what had been my corner desk, but would soon become the central workspace for TechFlow's most successful internal innovation project. Walking back toward the elevator, I passed the conference room where my team had spent the morning planning to recreate technology I'd already perfected. Their ambitious 8-week timeline now revealed as unnecessary duplication of existing capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on me that their competitive analysis had focused on building beyond innovations that were sitting 15 floors below their strategic planning sessions. Emma joined me at the elevator, clearly processing career lessons that wouldn't be covered in typical professional development programs. I keep thinking about how different things might have been if they'd recognized your capabilities from the beginning. How much innovation might be overlooked because people don't fit expected patterns. Her observation highlighted organizational challenges that extended beyond individual team dynamics, suggesting systematic improvements that could prevent future talent from being dismissed based on hierarchy rather than capability. That's part of what the innovation division will address. We'll be establishing evaluation processes that prioritize results over assumptions. The elevator arrived and we stepped inside, riding up toward the development floor that would soon be reorganized around enterprise innovation priorities rather than traditional project management hierarchies. Through the elevator windows, I could see downtown Austin stretching toward storm clouds that were gathering for afternoon weather. The same kind of dramatic skies that had accompanied my secret development sessions when TechFlow was quiet, and I could focus on building revolutionary solutions without corporate oversight. One more question, Emma said as we approached our floor. What would you tell someone who's working on innovative projects but feels like their contributions aren't being recognized? I thought about 18 months of patient development, strategic planning, and systematic exclusion that had ultimately created conditions for breakthrough innovation to emerge without corporate constraints. Build something that speaks louder than politics. Focus on solutions rather than recognition. And remember that the right timing matters more than immediate validation. The elevator doors opened onto our development floor, revealing familiar cubicles and corner desks where corporate innovation was supposed to happen but rarely did. Brandon was already at his workstation, probably updating project management software to reflect the dramatic changes in development priorities that Thompson's announcement had created. Sophia had claimed a conference room for what appeared to be strategic reassessment, her laptop displaying the kind of market analysis that would now focus on integration opportunities rather than competitive recreation. Riley looked energized by possibilities for contributing to proven successful technology rather than attempting to build unproven solutions under impossible timelines. I returned to my corner desk, the same workspace where I'd spent 2 years being systematically excluded from strategic discussions while building technology that would soon transform TechFlow's competitive position. My monitors displayed the private development environment that had enabled breakthrough innovation through patient focus and strategic timing. The irony wasn't lost on me that corporate hierarchy had been completely inverted through revelations that transformed, excluded, technical support into central strategic leadership. The team lunches I'd been excluded from had provided exactly the development time needed to build revolutionary solutions. The strategic discussions I'd been dismissed from had freed me to focus on user research and algorithmic optimization that exceeded traditional corporate innovation processes. My phone displayed a message from Patricia. Industry response is extraordinary. 3 acquisition offers received within 2 hours of Thompson's announcement. Your strategic timing was perfect. The message confirmed that revealing my platform at exactly the right moment had maximized both recognition and market positioning, demonstrating how patient planning could transform systematic exclusion into strategic advantage. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, expanded teams, and corporate leadership that would shape TechFlow's innovation culture for years to come. But today, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, looking around the development floor where colleagues were processing lessons about talent recognition, innovation timing, and the consequences of systematic exclusion that had nearly prevented their company from benefiting from revolutionary technology that was sitting just 15 feet away. The quiet corner desk developer who had been excluded from lunch planning was now leading the division that would define enterprise productivity standards for the next decade. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't immediate vindication, but building something so extraordinary that exclusion transformed into strategic necessity, and dismissal became corporate competitive advantage. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.